Enna sat quietly on the worn wooden bench at the train station, her eyes lost in the reflection that stared back at her from the glass of the window. The woman in the glass was a stranger to her now hollow cheeks, deep circles under her eyes, and a dull gaze that seemed to see nothing at all. It was as if the world around her had lost its colour, and she couldn't bring herself to look away. She had never imagined she would look like this, broken, tired, defeated, a shadow of who she used to be. The suitcase on her shoulder felt impossibly heavy. It wasn't the weight of the clothes inside that made it drag her down, but the weight of everything she was leaving behind 7 years of marriage, the life she had built with Paul, the endless compromises that had drained her spirit. The suitcase was the only thing she owned now, her only possession, and somehow that seemed like a cruel joke. It was all she had after all these years of giving up her dreams, her voice, and everything she once believed in. Her fingers clutched the strap, and for a moment, the weight was almost too much to bear. She felt the pull of the past, tugging at her heart, threatening to bring her to her knees. But no, she couldn't give in. Not now, not after everything she had endured. Train speaker crackled, announcing the next departure, but the metallic voice barely registered in Lena's mind. She didn't need to hear the destination. She already knew. She was going back to where it all started, the small town where she grew up, to her mother Bernice's house, back to the place where she was once free, before Paul, before the constant undermining of her dreams, back to a time when she could still write without fear, when she still believed in the beauty of her words. The memory of her last argument with Paul rushed over her. It had been the final straw, the last moment when she realized how much she had been suffocating in that relationship. "You'll never be anything more than that, Lena," Paul had said, his voice smooth and calculated. "A dreamer who can't handle reality. That's why I have to make the decisions for both of us." His words had stung, but it was the contempt in his tone that had broken something inside her. She had tried for so long to make it work, to be the wife he wanted, to fit into the mold he expected of her. But with every passing day, her own voice had become quieter, drowned out by his criticisms, his assumptions, and his demands. How many times had he dismissed her passions? How many times had he told her that her dreams were childish, that she needed to be more like him, practical, grounded, focused only on the real world? But this time, something inside her snapped. Or maybe, for the first time, it wasn't a break. It was a release, a freedom she hadn't known she was capable of. Instead of arguing, instead of pleading for him to understand, she had simply nodded. And then she had packed her things, the suitcase that had been sitting under the bed for weeks, waiting for this moment to come. It wasn't dramatic. There were no grand speeches, no angry words, just a quiet final decision. She left. Paul hadn't followed her, hadn't even tried to stop her. Perhaps he didn't believe she would go through with it. Or maybe, deep down, he no longer cared enough to try. The thought twisted in her chest, but she pushed it away. This was for her. She wasn't leaving for him, for their marriage, or for the life they had built. She was leaving for herself, to rediscover a part of her she thought she had lost forever. Now, sitting at the station, Lena's eyes scanned the bustling crowd. People hurried by, families laughing and talking, couples holding hands, executives rushing to catch their trains. Each one of them seemed to have a destination, a purpose, a reason to keep moving forward. She, on the other hand, felt like a blank page, an empty notebook. The thought made her smile bitterly. Blank pages. She used to fill them with stories and poems, small fragments of her soul that she poured out onto the paper. How many years had it been since she last wrote? 3? 4? The memories of those days came rushing back, clearer than ever. She had been so alive then, so full of ideas and dreams. But Paul had never understood. It's a waste of time, he had told her time and time again, his voice dismissive. You need to focus on real things. Stop daydreaming and start living. In the real world. He had convinced her, little by little, that writing was an indulgence, that her creativity was childish, that her voice didn't matter. And so, piece by piece, she had silenced herself. At first, it had been small compromises, putting off writing for a day or two, choosing to clean the house or make dinner instead. But then those days turned into weeks, then months. Soon, she had stopped writing altogether. The notebook she had once filled with colorful stories and vibrant thoughts were tucked away in a drawer, gathering dust. She couldn't even remember the last time she had picked up a pen and written anything. Lena closed her eyes for a moment, trying to push away the pain. The train was coming soon. She needed to focus on the next step, getting on that train, getting away and finding her way home. But even as the announcement echoed over the loudspeaker, even as the train approached the platform, her mind kept circling back to one question. Who was she now? Who was Lena Moretti without Paul? Without the years that had stripped away her voice and her confidence? She wasn't sure anymore, but she would find out, one step at a time. The sound of the train arriving on the tracks echoed through the station, but Lena hardly registered it. The hustle and bustle around her continued, passengers rushing past, each with their own destinations, their own stories, but Lena felt like she was outside it all, like a ghost in a crowd that was moving far too fast. Her fingers absently twisted the edge of the sandwich wrapper in her hands, staring down at the piece of bread she had taken out, but suddenly lost her appetite for. She sighed, her mind drifting to her mother's house, the place she'd called home so many years ago. Would it still feel like home after everything she had been through? Would her mother even understand why she was coming back? Why she had walked away from a life she'd spent so long trying to build? A small piece of bread fell from the sandwich, drifting slowly to the ground. Lena didn't bother to pick it up. She was tired of pretending, tired of fighting, tired of trying to keep it all together. She just wanted to be alone for a while, to sit in her own quiet space and breathe. But before she could retreat further into her thoughts, a voice broke through, smooth and gentle, yet familiar enough to tug at something deep inside her. Let me get that for you. Lena blinked, startled by the interruption, and turned her head. There, standing behind her, was a man about her age, with messy brown hair, kind eyes, and thin-framed glasses that looked as though they had been carefully chosen, but were still just slightly too big for his face. His smile was warm, and there was something in his expression that stirred a vague sense of recognition. Something distant, like a forgotten song she couldn't quite place, but knew she had heard before. The stranger bent down and reached for the bread on the ground, but Lena found herself shaking her head, the instinctive politeness kicking in. Thank you, but it's okay, she replied softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. She had grown so used to speaking in hushed tones, after years of Paul's insistence that she speak less loudly, be less excited, be less everything. Man didn't seem to mind. He straightened up, his smile remaining intact, and took a step back. You don't remember me, do you? Lena's frown deepened as she studied his face more carefully, trying to place him. There was something familiar about him, something in his gentle demeanor, but it wasn't clicking. She searched her memory, but the past few years had been a blur of routines and disappointments. The man must have noticed the hesitation in her eyes, because his smile softened in a way that almost felt like a shared secret. I'm Samuel Cooper, he said, as though saying his name would make everything fall into place. We were in Mrs. Patterson's literature class together at Centro Norte High School. I sat at the back of the room. The mention of the high school sent a jolt through her images of her younger self, of classrooms, of old friends she hadn't thought of in ages, resurfaced like forgotten memories stirred from the bottom of a drawer. Samuel Cooper, the quiet boy who was always lost in his books, who would never show anyone his writing, his poems, the ones he scribbled in the corners of his notebook. She remembered him now, just a shadow, a glimpse, but it was enough to make her heart skip a beat. Sam, Lena repeated, the name almost a whisper. And suddenly, like the turning of a page, everything clicked into place. She saw him standing in the hallway of their high school. Head down, a group of boys laughing and taunting him as his papers scattered across the floor. She remembered her instinct to stop and help, to kneel down beside him and gather his scattered thoughts from the floor, as if she were picking up pieces of a broken dream. For a moment, the station blurred around her. The past, so long buried under years of silence, resurfaced with a rush of emotions she hadn't expected. I remember you, she said, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. You were always reading something. Always with your books. Sam chuckled softly, his eyes lighting up. And you were always writing something, he replied, sitting down next to her on the bench, maintaining a respectful distance but close enough that Lena could feel the energy between them shift. Your notebooks with the colourful covers. You used to decorate them with flowers and birds. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't thought about those notebooks in so long. Those were the notebooks she used to fill with stories, with poems, with all the words that had once felt like they were pouring out of her, effortlessly. She could almost picture them now. The bright, bold covers with intricate drawings on. The edges, each one a little piece of her soul captured in ink. But then, over time, those notebooks had gathered dust, tucked away and forgotten in a drawer. That was a long time ago, Lena said, her voice shaky, almost apologetic. The weight of her lost years hung heavily between them. I haven't written in so long. Sam didn't seem to mind. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a familiar object, a yellow pencil, worn and battered, with the tip so short it barely fit in his hand. It was the same pencil Lena had once used. For all her writing. The same pencil she had given to Sam when he had dropped his papers in the hallway, all those years ago. This pencil, Sam said softly, holding it out to her. You gave this to me. I still carry it everywhere. You told me it was your lucky pencil, the one you used to start all your stories. You said the best stories begin with courage. Lena's heart skipped a beat as she looked at the pencil. It was the same pencil she had used for years, the one that had started it all. And to think she had completely forgotten about it until now. You kept it? Lena asked, her voice thick with emotion. The pencil, worn and well used, was a relic of a time she had tried so hard to forget. And yet here it was, in his hands, still carrying the weight of all those memories. I couldn't. Throw it away, Sam said with a small, shy smile. It's been with me all these years. I kept it because you were right. You said words have power, and that someday mine would find the right people. You gave me the courage to keep writing, even when no one else believed in me. Lena's throat tightened. She had forgotten, or maybe had chosen to forget, how much those words had meant. How they had meant something to Sam. Something that had stayed with him all this time. She didn't even remember the act itself, the simple kindness of offering him the pencil, but hearing him speak of it, with such sincerity and gentleness, made her chest ache. Sam, she began, but she couldn't finish. Instead, she reached out and took the pencil from his hand. The weight of it was heavier than she had expected. Heavier than just the wood and lead. It felt like a bridge between the past and the present. A reminder of who she used to be. For the first time in a long time, Lena felt a flicker of something. Deep within her, something she thought had been extinguished. Hope, maybe. Or perhaps it was just the first inkling that she could still find herself again. As Lena stood to board the train, her fingers lingered on the worn yellow pencil that Sam had placed in her hand. The pencil, so small now, had once been a symbol of possibility, of beginnings, of courage. Sam's words echoed in her mind. Best stories begin with courage. But Lena wasn't sure how to begin again. How did you start writing when you had buried your words so deep for so long? The train's doors opened with a screech, pulling her back to the present. People around her began to move, filing into the train, their faces tired yet determined. As the crowd rushed past, Lena felt a sudden pang of loss. She had been one of them once, hadn't she? Driven, full of ideas and aspirations. Now, she felt like an outsider, someone who had stopped walking her own path. But something was different now. Something had shifted inside her. Sam had reminded her of who she once was, of the girl who wasn't afraid to dream. I am Lena Moretti, she thought to herself. I am not just Paul's wife. I am more than that. I think it's time to return this, Sam said, his voice gentle as he held out the yellow pencil. Lena paused, her hand hovering over it, feeling the weight of the small object in her palm. She could almost hear the echoes of her younger self, her confidence, her dreams, the spark of creativity she had once carried so effortlessly. No, she said softly, shaking her head. Keep it. It seems to have worked well for you. Sam's smile widened, a look of understanding in his eyes. He didn't push her to take the pencil back, but instead he reached into his bag and pulled out something else. A new notebook, with a brown leather cover. It was simple, elegant, and yet it felt like a promise. For when you're ready to start writing again, Sam said, his voice warm and encouraging. Lena hesitated for a moment, feeling the familiar ache of doubt creeping in. Am I really ready? She wondered. Can I really go back to who I was before? But then, looking at Sam's face, at the hope and respect he had for her, she knew the answer. She wasn't ready yet, but the door had been opened, and she wasn't going to close it again. Lena took the notebook, feeling its comforting weight in her hands. The smooth, rich leather, the promise of a fresh start, was almost overwhelming. It was like holding a piece of her future untouched, untainted, waiting for her to fill its pages. How do you know I stopped writing? She asked quietly, her voice almost a whisper. Sam smiled softly, his eyes lighting up with fondness as he looked at her. Because I read your stories in the school's literary magazine. I remember each one. Someone who wrote like that would never stop completely, unless something held them back. Lena's heart fluttered, a strange mixture of gratitude and regret filling her chest. She had forgotten that part of herself. The part that wrote without fear. The part that didn't care whether anyone else understood. Because the words were enough. But that part had been buried for so long, suffocated by the weight of Paul's criticisms, by years of believing she wasn't good enough. The train's doors began to close, and Lena knew it was time to leave. Time to start the next chapter of her life, whatever that might look like. I need to go, she said, her voice steady now, more confident than it had been in years. She adjusted the strap of her suitcase on her shoulder and began to step into the train. But Sam's voice stopped her. Can I write to you? He asked quickly, his tone full of uncertainty. Or call you, just to know that you arrived safely? Lena hesitated for only a moment. It was strange letting someone in again after so many years of shutting people out. After being controlled by Paul's judgment, his demands on who she should be. But Sam wasn't like Paul. He was kind, patient, and had always respected her boundaries. He saw her for who she truly was, not as a project or a possession, but as a person with her own voice, her own worth. "Yes," she said softly, her heart racing. "I would like that." She pulled a piece of paper from her bag, and with trembling fingers, wrote down her mother's number. The number wasn't her own, but it was the number of the person who had always been there for her, even when she had forgotten to be there for herself. It was the number that represented safety, stability, and the love that she had been missing for so long. Sam took the paper carefully, as though it were precious to him. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. "Have a good trip, Lena Moretti." When he said her maiden name, it hit her like a wave. Lena Moretti. It was as if he had just brought her old self back to life. She wasn't Lena Harrington anymore. She wasn't just Paul's wife. She was Lena Moretti, the woman who could still write, who could still dream. Lena stepped onto the train, feeling a strange sense of lightness in her chest, a feeling she hadn't had in years. As the train pulled away, she glanced out the window and saw Sam standing there, watching her leave with that same kind, understanding expression. It was as if he was saying goodbye, but also, in a way, saying see you later. Because Sam knew something that Lena was only beginning to understand, that this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something new. Back at her mother's house, everything was the same. The smell of cinnamon and coffee filled the air, just like when Lena was a little girl. The yellow kitchen walls, the floral curtains, the old clock. That was always 5 minutes slow. It was like stepping back in time, back to a place where things were simple, and she felt safe. Her mother, the niece, was the same, too petite, energetic, and full of life. At 65, she still had that presence, the kind that made anyone feel like everything was going to be okay. "My daughter," the niece said, her arms open wide, and Lena stepped into them, feeling the warmth and comfort she had missed for so long. "You're home now." That night, after a long, heartfelt conversation with her mother, Lena retired to her childhood bed. It felt strange but comforting. She opened the new notebook Sam had given her, its blank pages staring up at her like an invitation. The first few words didn't come easily. They never did. But soon they began to flow. "Today I left with just a suitcase." The words came slowly. At first, like water trickling from a dam. But soon they gained momentum, pouring out of her like she had unlocked something inside herself. She wrote until her hand ached, until her eyes burned with fatigue. And when she finally fell asleep, the notebook lay open beside her, like a promise of more to come. The next morning the phone rang. "Lena? It's Sam," came his voice over the line. "Just wanted to know if you arrived safely." The conversation lasted 2 hours. He talked about his work as a literature professor at the local university, about his books, and about how he still visited his mother in the nursing home every week. "I never imagined I would find you there," Sam confessed. "I thought it was a sign." In the months that followed, Lena and Sam's connection deepened. Their phone calls became routine, and Sam sent her books, classics, contemporary poetry, and his own works. Lena devoured each one, rediscovering her love for literature and for writing. The brown notebook filled up, and soon it was replaced by another, and another. She began to send her writings to literary magazines, facing rejection after rejection. But with each acceptance, she celebrated as if it were a victory. One day, Paul called. His voice was a mix of pleading and accusations. "You'll come back," he said. But it wasn't a question. It was a statement. "You always come back." Lena's heart didn't race like it used to. Instead, it was calm, firm. "Not this time," she replied, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. When she hung up, she realized her hands weren't trembling. She was no longer afraid of him. A year after returning to her mother's house, Sam invited Lena out for coffee. As they sat in the small-town cafe, Sam seemed almost as nervous as she was. Finally, he placed a card on the table. "The university is offering a creative writing workshop for beginners," he said. "I thought maybe you could teach a few classes." Lena looked at the card in disbelief. "Me? But I barely started writing again. I don't have any qualifications." "You have everything that's necessary," Sam said gently. "I've read your texts, Lena. There's something there, and you understand what it means to lose your voice and find it again. There are many people who need to hear that." The workshop started with only 5 students, but soon grew to 20. Lena discovered she loved teaching, seeing the spark in her students' eyes when they found the right words for the first time. And then, one rainy afternoon, after a particularly intense class on writing as a form of healing, Sam invited her to dinner. It was a cozy dinner at his apartment, filled with books and windows that overlooked a small park. In the center of the living room, displayed in a glass box, was the yellow pencil, now so small it could barely be held. "I could never throw it away," Sam explained. "It was my beginning." Lena sat across from him, feeling the weight of her own journey. The last few years had been a whirlwind of pain, of rediscovery, of healing. And now, she was here, with Sam, a friend who had helped her find her way back to herself. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't over yet. 2 years later, Lena Moretti published her first book, The Suitcase. It was a collection of short stories, each one a piece of her soul. The release event was held at a small bookstore in town, and it was filled with familiar faces, workshop students, rediscovered friends, her mother beaming with pride. Sam was there by her side, as he had been throughout the entire process from the first draft to the final review. After the event, when the last person had left, Sam pulled a small box from his pocket. "I know you said you don't want to get married again," he said, his voice trembling with nervousness. "And I completely respect that. This is not a ring." Inside the box was a silver chain with a small heart pendant. 4 years later, when their daughter Sophia turned 3, Lena found her sitting in the office, scribbling on a piece of paper with the old yellow pencil, now so small that her little fingers could barely hold it. "Mummy, I'm writing a story," Sophia said. Seriously, Lena knelt beside her. "Really? What's your story about?" "A princess who saves a prince with a magic pencil," Sophia said, showing Lena the paper covered in indecipherable scribbles. Lena looked at her daughter, at the pencil, and then out the window where she could see Sam in the garden. And in that moment, she felt a wave of gratitude so intense that it almost took her breath away. Her life wasn't perfect. It wasn't without challenges. But it was authentically hers, built word, page by page. And this time, she wasn't afraid to let it unfold.